So in this talk, I'm going to kind of reinforce and probably expand on some of the things that we've been talking about today. And I'm going to outline the main challenges facing rock art in Scotland and how community co-production in the Scotland's Rock Art Project, or ScRAP, has enabled us to tackle these challenges. So we're really lucky, we're really privileged in Scotland to have such a wealth of rock art. It's not only visually beautiful and intriguing, but it's also a very valuable archaeological resource containing unique information about Scotland's prehistory and about the Neolithic and early Bronze Age connections with Atlantic Europe. And yet we understand so little about it. It's relatively undervalued, and the vast majority of it is neglected and vulnerable. So you can perhaps see from these two examples here, where we've got some lovely elaborate carvings, one being regularly trampled by cattle in front of a cattle feeder, and the other one being rapidly engulfed by newly planted forestry. So as we heard about at our lunchtime workshop, assessing value in rock art is difficult to measure, but we can perhaps get an idea of relative value by comparing the proportions of rock art and other types of carved stones that are designated as scheduled monuments. And Alan Rutherford talked about this in our lunchtime workshop. Less than 4% of Scotland's rock art is protected through scheduling, and this includes rock art that's been scheduled because it's in other monuments. Whereas by about 60% of Pictish symbol stones and Ogham inscriptions are scheduled, and around 36% of early medieval cross slabs are scheduled. Also, there are only 6 rock art sites are managed as Hess Properties in Care, or PICs, whereas there are higher proportions of PICs for the other types of carved stones shown here. We can also assess relative value of rock art through community-led projects, such as those in the Adopt a Monument scheme run by Archaeology Scotland, and Paul and Phil talked about this at lunchtime. Archaeology Scotland has run over 100 Adopt a Monument projects, but only one of these is focused specifically on rock art, and this is the lovely stone at the Heights of Fodderty, which has carvings on 2 sides, which has been mentioned a couple of times today as well. Another indicator of relative value might be the volume of published material. For example, there's a whole kind of plethora of books focusing specifically on Pictish symbol stones, and these are just some examples, but only a handful of books devoted to Scotland's rock art. And some of these are over 40 years out of date and now out of print as well. So we all want to know what rock art means, but understanding its meaning or meanings in the past is probably the greatest challenge facing us. As Alison discussed so beautifully in her keynote talk, there's been some fantastic research in the past 20 to 30 years, which has enriched our understanding. But this type of research is relatively minimal, and there are still very many questions. Rock art studies in Scotland have concentrated on specific areas or sites, primarily in Kilmartin, but to a lesser extent in Dumfries, in Galloway and Loch Tay, whereas other regions such as Highland have been almost entirely overlooked. And we also lack understanding of Scotland's rock art as a whole, its regional variability and local adaptations, its connectivity, and its integration within the wider archaeological narrative for Scotland, Britain, and Europe. One of the key reasons for this is, as Richard Bradley has put it, that there are very few regions where the rock art's been recorded sufficiently to enable full analysis. The potential for research depends on the quality of the data. Inconsistent, incomplete, and unreliable data not only limit the scope of research and understanding, but can also produce misleading results and interpretations. Canmore, the National Record for Scotland's Historic Environment, is a fantastic public resource and the main source of information about rock art. But because the data have been compiled over 200 years by many different people using different techniques and with different agendas, there are many inconsistencies. Individual records in Canmore often include more than one rock art panel, often up to 12 rock art panels. Some records are very detailed, whereas others contain almost no information, and the grid references are often pretty inaccurate. So this all constrains and creates problems for research. Rock art is also very visual, and to study it, we need to be able to see the detail in the carvings and in their relationships to the rock surface. But when we started the project, only 6% of Canmore records had any digital images associated with them and no 3D models. And again, this severely restricts research potential. So the aims of ScRAP, the Scotland's Rock Art Project, was to address these challenges by working with communities across the country to enhance understanding and appreciation of prehistoric rock art. This dynamic relationship between engaging, understanding, valuing, and caring is well established in heritage management and conservation practice. And it also shapes the research framework for all forms of carved stones in Scotland that Sally Foster was talking about earlier. It underpins the priorities. It also underpins the priorities for Scotland's historic environment strategy and Scotland's archaeology strategy. So community engagement and co-production can not only enhance understanding and value of our rock art, but it can also lead to improved care. So let's look a little bit more detail now at how community co-production in ScRAP has enabled us to tackle the challenges facing Scotland's rock art. First of all, ScRAP has provided a motive and a structure for community engagement with rock art and an opportunity for people to build skills and expertise through investigation and recording. In 2017 and 2018, we ran a series of intensive training sessions around Scotland in identifying and recording rock art. We trained around 170 people, and this resulted in the formation of 11 community teams covering different parts of the country. The teams vary in size from around 30 members to one very productive member, and they incorporate a rich range of knowledge, experience, and perspectives. Following the training, we've spent the last few years working closely with our community teams to build knowledge by recording rock art that's already known and also looking for unrecorded panels, and together developing a detailed database of Scotland's rock art. We use a standardized recording methodology to collect quantitative, descriptive, and visual information for each panel. The recording captures detail at different scales, from the carvings and the rock surface to their contexts within the wider landscape. And we use a combination of tools, including a specially designed recording form, sketches, conventional photographs, and photogrammetry to create 3D models. And you've heard quite a bit about this today, but I just want to make a few more points about the benefits of 3D modelling, both for community co-production on this scale and for rock art recording as well. Because 3D modelling is based on taking multiple overlapping photographs, it has no impact on the rock surface, unlike traditional recording methods such as rubbing. In the field, you only need a camera and a scale bar, so these can easily be carried, and this is really helpful for recording in remote locations or like Pat cycling around Butte. And we've also provided each team with the processing software, the Agisoft Metashape software, to process their models. The technique is quick to use in the field, and that makes it ideal for large-scale projects. And because it's based on photographs, the models are objective and consistent. And again, this is really valuable for a project like ScRAP, which involves many different people in the recording process. And most importantly for rock art, it captures accurate and detailed information about the motifs and about their relationship to the rock art, even when the carvings are faint and difficult to see in the field. And you can perhaps get a little idea of this from the example here, which is the Braes of Balloch in Perthshire, comparing the Royal Commission scale drawing to the 3D model that we created last year. And you can see that there's a lot more precision and detail in the 3D model. So this unprecedented level of detail provides new insights into the subtle variations and nuances of the carvings, their arrangements, and their behaviours on the rock surface. And Joanna will talk about this in much more detail in her presentation after this. So our aim was to work with our community teams to record a significant proportion of the known rock art in Scotland. When we started the project in 2017, there were around 2,400 records in Canmore classified as rock art using the various Canmore terms, which you can see here. And this map shows the distribution of rock art based on that Canmore data from 2017. We estimated that we and our community teams could together investigate 80% of these existing records, which equates to about 1,900 panels. Now, 4 years later, there are 3,300 records in our database, but not all of these are rock art. These 900 new additions to the database include records from the Regional Historic Environment Records, or HERs, that were not already in Canmore, records created by splitting up the existing Canmore records, which contained multiple rock art panels, and around 240 new discoveries by our teams from across the country. So far, we have investigated and recorded 1,500 panels. And these are shown on the map on the right by the red dots, whereas the blue dots are the ones that have not yet been investigated. About half of these panels have been recorded by our community teams and about half by the ScRAP team. It takes, on average, at least 1 day to locate, record, and process the data for each panel. So this perhaps gives you some idea of the huge contribution that our community teams have made. Of these 1,500 panels that we've investigated, 15%, around 200, are not rock art. And as Alison and other people have talked about today, most of these are natural features recorded as cut marks, such as this example from North Uis shown in the little 3D model here. So this brings the total number of rock art panels in our database, as far as we know so far, to around 3,100. Around 20% of the sites that have been investigated were not located or have been lost or destroyed. And that means that overall, we currently have detailed records and 3D models for almost 1,000 rock art panels. Unfortunately, losing a year of fieldwork to COVID has had a significant impact on our recording programme. If we kind of hypothetically project the rate of recording from before COVID into this year, we could have investigated by now well over 2,000 rock art panels. With COVID restrictions now being lifted, our teams are starting to get back into the field. And so by the end of the project in December, we hope to have investigated and recorded something closer to our original estimate of 1,900 panels. The database that is co-produced with our community teams provides a powerful research tool for ourselves and for others to enhance our understanding of Scotland's rock art. Because the data are consistent, they can be used for comparative analysis, and the level of detail enables this analysis at different scales, from the types of motifs and their relationship to the rock surface, to the attributes of the rocks selected for carving, and the archaeological and physical contexts of the panels, as well as the wider regional and interregional character and connectivity. And Joanna and Linda will be talking about this in much more detail in their presentations next. Once our research is completed, we'll be sharing the results through a series of publications for academic and non-academic audiences, and of course with our community teams. So our database can also contribute to the management, conservation and protection of Scotland's rock art. For example, the 3D models provide benchmark data for assessing and measuring deterioration of rock art over time. Even just having an accurate grid reference can help avoid destruction and damage to rock art. This lovely cup and ring marked rock in Cowell was originally recorded over 100 metres away before it was re-recorded by our ScRAP team in the right place. And because the original location in Canmore was inaccurate, the rock had sadly been severely damaged by forestry operations, including, you can see this kind of whopping great caterpillar track crushing part of the rock surface. The data and the insights gained through ScRAP will also be used by our colleagues in HES designations team to inform decisions on which rock art panels should be designated as scheduled monuments. So this will hopefully lead to many more rock art panels being protected through scheduling in the future. Sharing and celebrating rock art are a kind of fundamental part of what we've been doing. In order to share their rock art data, our community teams upload their fieldwork records to our website. And once we've checked and validated each record, everything goes into our database and becomes publicly accessible on our website. So people can then use our website search tools and download those search results, or they can download the entire ScRAP database for whatever reasons they want to use it for. The website and database will continue to be publicly accessible for at least 5 years after the project finishes, and hopefully for much longer if HES are willing to support it. By December, when the project finishes, we will have transferred copies of all the ScRAP data to Canmore and to the regional historic environment records for long-term curation and public access. As well as all the public talks and webinars that we, the ScRAP team, have delivered during the project, our community teams have initiated and collaborated on a whole range of activities and events to share and celebrate rock art with the wider community. And we've heard about some of these in the talks today. The teams have led guided walks to rock art, they've given presentations, they've been the focus of TV and radio programmes, they've published articles in newsletters, magazines and journals and on social media. They've created artwork inspired by rock art and even provoked a community excavation, as we heard from Nick earlier. The work that we in our community teams are doing is raising awareness of Scotland's rock art, and hopefully this is enhancing contemporary value. But another dimension of our research, which again we talked about in our lunchtime workshop, the panel discussion, and which is being led by Stuart Jeffrey, is working with our community teams, and here they all are, to explore their sense of value in rock art and the historic environment, and what effect engaging with rock art through ScRAP has had on that sense of value. So understanding social value and significance of rock art is important for informing decisions on how it's managed and cared for. So the outcomes of this research will feed directly into this decision-making process. So that kind of completes this cycle of engaging, understanding, valuing and caring that I was mentioning earlier. I like to think that the production of rock art in prehistory was a community endeavour, and that all these interconnected dimensions of past community co-production are in some way embodied in the carvings. So just to kind of sum that up, has ScRAP been effective in tackling the challenges facing Scotland's rock art? Well, yes, certainly it has in the short term, but just as importantly, it's laid some firm foundations to build on after the project finishes, especially in our database, the outcomes of our research, our model for community co-production, and the expertise that's embedded in our community teams. So I just want to finish with a few kind of pointers to the future, especially, these are perhaps especially relevant to our community teams. So first of all, our community teams, I hope, will want to carry on recording using their skills and expertise to investigate sites that have not already been visited during ScRAP and carry on looking for new sites, and hopefully passing on their skills by training others in their communities. There are also ongoing discussions within HES about providing support for the teams after ScRAP, and we'll keep you updated on that. This information then, these field records can be added to Canmore through My Canmore, and that will enable people to add detailed descriptions, which includes lots of information, as well as their own thoughts and local observations, images and links to 3D models. And of course, new records and detailed records can be submitted to Discovery and Excavation in Scotland, as Jennifer Toms was talking about in the lunchtime workshop. And from DES, they will also be shared with Canmore. Our community teams could continue the fantastic work they've been doing, raising awareness with landowners and land managers about rock art on their land, and they can continue monitoring local rock art for potential risks or damage. There's also lots that our community teams, and in fact all of us, can continue doing to celebrate and promote rock art through local initiatives and national schemes, such as Adopt a Monument. And there's lots of potential as well for expanding on the fantastic work of Matt Ritchie and Kenny Brophy that we've heard about today, as well as others such as Jane Miller from Archaeology Scotland, to use rock art to inspire creativity and learning in young people. And I think that's a really important thing that we should be promoting for the future after the project. So I hope that we can all work together, or continue working together, to ensure that Scotland's fascinating and irreplaceable rock art is better understood, better valued, and better cared for into the future. Thank you.
That was a really fantastic overview of the project, covering a whole range of topics, and I think really demonstrates quite clearly the amount of effort and commitment that has gone into this, and the results that we've got. COVID notwithstanding, it's still been an astonishing achievement, I think. To the attendees, I'd just like to say, feel free to put questions into the question and answer box. We've got just a couple of minutes for questions, and one of them just popped up. And I'll also just say that unusually in this session, when we get to the end of it, I'm hostage to fortune here, there may be time for a few additional questions which we can give to all panelists. So the first question is from Dan. He says he's been working with photogrammetry and hoping to create my project up and running next year. He wants to create 1 to 200 3D scans. It is for an art project to raise awareness and promote rock art. Can I donate or send 3D models to Canmore or ScRAP to fill their database?
Tricky question, isn't it? It depends really, because the project finishes in December. So after that, it's going to be more tricky to get material on rock art into the database. I mean, certainly, Dan, if you want to send us your email address, you can find that on our website. It's our general ScRAP email address. There's in the contact us page, and we can perhaps discuss the best way to do that. But yeah, certainly in principle, certainly yes, we'd love to have more information. It's just how to get it into Canmore is more of a discussion that we need to have. So if you just send us your email address, we can follow that up with you directly, if that's okay.
So Dan's thanking you for that answer, so that's great. He's going to do that. Another question from Andrew Powell, where he's pointing out that access to the Agisoft, excuse me, has been central to the enjoyment in recording the ScRAP project, and he's asking whether these licenses are going to come to an end when the project ends. Right.
Hi, Andrew. How are you? So no, not at all. The license is forever, really, and just hang on to it. We don't want 35 licenses back, really. But no, that's part of the kind of benefit of being involved in the project. So do please carry on using it. But remember, it is an educational license only, so it's purely for non-commercial use.
You've not become a millionaire using
it. No.
So one we've got just a few seconds left, but a really nice question, I think, has just come in from Sarah Scott. And she's asking, if you could go back in time to the beginning of this project, what would you tell the Tertia of that period?
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for your question. I would, well, I would say avoid COVID. Try and not run a project like this during a pandemic, for a start. I think projects like this are always problematic because they have a finite time period, and working with communities and community co-production, you kind of want to go on forever. So I think that would, I mean, ideally, I would do a much longer project, and that would. I think also, I don't know. I don't think I would change very much, really, apart from COVID and the sort of time scale, because it would, starting again would only throw up other issues and so on as well. So I think, all in all, things have gone pretty much as planned, taking out some of the other issues. But yeah, don't know if that answers your question, but yes, I think it's just been great fun most of the time.
I think that's a very reassuring answer,